Are webinars dead? No, of course they aren't. They are more awesome than ever. We're going to be chatting about that and much more with Tim Paige coming up right now here on The Rise to the Top. And hello, my great and good friends. It is your great and good friend, David Sipe McCarlin, a.k.a. DSG. I want to welcome you here to episode 8 of the new season of the Rise to the Top podcast. Woo! I'm excited. Are you excited? I'm excited. So today we're going to talk about webinars. And it's funny because, webinars are something where towards the end of last year, 2017, even in 2016, people started talking about their demise, like some kind of crazy thing, saying, "Oh, webinars are dying and they're no longer effective," and things like that. And let me tell you something right away. That is 100% false. 100% false. What's dying are the people that do these webinars that give no value. These people that do these webinars that trick people and dupe people and things like that. That's got no place, never did. But now people are more wary of that, right? When they see webinars from people that promise one thing and deliver another, or, are super sketchy about it. Bottom line is that webinars have changed, and this is a good thing. Right? This is a very positive thing. It's a very good thing. And I can tell you right now, for my business, webinars have never been better. Okay? Now, I want to introduce you to Tim Paige. Now, Tim Paige used to be the conversion educator at Lead Pages. That's where he worked for years. He did literally thousands of webinars. We're going to talk about that coming up here in this interview. And we also hired him at CourseCats, at our software company, to be doing weekly webinars for us. Maybe you've seen him. Maybe you haven't. You could definitely check him out at coursecats.com/Tim. Get on a webinar with him, and you could check out his magic in action. And he's going to show you how to build an online course website. It's absolutely killer. So in this podcast today, Tim and I are going to have a very, 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 very candid conversation about webinars. What's working now, what used to work that no longer works, and how you can absolutely dominate with webinars in 2018. All right, my friends, enjoy the podcast with myself and Tim Paige. All right, my friends. Well, now I am joined by the one and only Tim Paige. How are you, Tim?
What? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And by the way, just in case anyone's curious that if we're tech experts or not, right before this interview, I realized, of course, my mic wasn't properly selected and was doing my computer mic, which would have created one of the most awful interview sounds of all time. So I'm just glad we're plugged in, Tim, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, we got here with everything plugged in, and it sounds good. That's step one.
Now we're going uphill from here. So, by the way, where are you coming at us from here today on the podcast?
Yeah, this is Syracuse, New York, home of the Sweet 16 dance and college basketball team this year, even though we were terrible.
Which was, by the way, extremely hard to believe, and I watched all their games, and I in the tournament, I could not believe any victories that happened there. But anyway, be that as it may, today we're just going to be chatting about webinars, and, I was thinking about this. How many years did you do webinars at Lead Pages?
Almost 4. It's just under 4. Yeah.
Almost 4. And now, how would you describe what you do now with webinars?
Yeah, I'm kind of a webinar gun for hire. So awesome software companies bring me in to create webinars and then host them. It's similar to what I did at Lead Pages, but I'm just doing it for a few awesome, rock star companies.
Awesome. And I mentioned this in the intro that we are, of course, one of those rock star companies, right? With CourseCats that we've been doing. And it's been a really interesting experience for us. So just to give just the context, and you might not know the exact number, but over the last, because you were at Lead Pages for 4 years, you've been doing, when did you leave Lead Pages?
It was like summer last year, end of summer.
Okay. So we're a little bit under a year right now. Including all together, how many live webinars-ish do you think you've done? Ish. I mean, ballpark it.
I'm just shy of 1,400.
14. So. I mean, so here's my first question is, how are you not dead? Because I'm telling you right now, I'm a high energy guy.
Yeah.
You're a high energy guy.
Yep.
You're married with kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm married with kids. Okay. When I do a webinar, and I love webinars because they're a massive sales tool for us. They're a massive list builder. They're a massive goodwill creator, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I am literally dead. I mean, meaning I roll on the ground. I sometimes try to roll out of the office to get to the bathroom or get a snack afterwards.
how have you survived 1,400 webinars? I really, it seriously is hurting my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I've done 2 days in the past where I've had 4 webinars in one day. That was my record. I went for 5, but we had one reschedule. And so how do I do it? I have no idea. And on top of it, I'm also a professional voice actor. So a lot of times after a webinar, I have to then get on a session with a client, whether it's NBC or whatever, and go do voiceover. And I'm sitting like this, like dying. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm weird.
Well, you are weird, which is great, which is why you're here. So let's talk about kind of the state of webinars in general. How would you right now, and we're talking to you now, focus more on doing webinars for software companies, which is a great niche for you. And of course, we know webinars work with a variety of niches. Now, most of the people here, obviously listening to the podcast, are my peeps. They're course creators, they're personal brands, et al., if you will. What would you currently say is the state of webinars in this world? I know it's a very broad question, but I think it's going to kick off a very interesting conversation.
No, it's a great topic. And here's the thing. Yes, I mostly do webinars for software companies, but I do have a client that's a course creator. And, we absolutely just crush it every single webinar. It's insane. So yeah, what's the state of webinars? It's ever evolving, just like anything else in the, interwebs world. I mean, it's different than it was once. It's still an amazing place. But the issue that's come up is that more and more people are starting to do webinars because they know they go, oh, this is a cash cow and I'm going to go sell a gazillion things. And so a lot of people will go up and do a webinar just focusing on selling things. And so, I think we've all been on that webinar,
Yes.
That was like, there's no focus on value. It's just get me to spend my money. And so a lot of people are getting, a little weary of joining a webinar. They're not really sure if they want to attend. They don't want to be, spend 60 minutes being pitched. So the way that we have to approach webinars is entirely different. We have to, more than ever, focus on providing real value. And like what that word always is like, what does that mean? Value. But we have to really help people with something they're struggling with. And we have to do it as quickly as possible in order to cut through the noise. Like just as an example, one of the webinars that we're doing, we get to a quick win within, 5 minutes, right? We get to the intro, but there's a quick win and it's a big one. In fact, some people have said it's their favorite part of the entire 60 minutes is that quick win that we get to 5 minutes in. And stuff like that is what makes all the difference. It's like really desperately wanting for the people that are on your webinar to be able to do something, even if they don't spend $1.
Right. Because, I mean, it's a great point because, that was going to be my follow-up is how do we combat the situation? But it's true. It's like with anything, when webinars were new, and I don't know exactly when that was. Let's just call it, 10 years ago, right? Yeah. Whatever, maybe even less. Is that as with anything that's new, once it started working, it was like a major cash cow for people, right? Because there wasn't anything really like it. You would have a captive audience. You could sell, people would sign up for these by the droves. Now there's higher competition. There's people that are doing incredible webinars. There's people that are doing horrible webinars. Yeah. There, right. Yep. And so what happens is, and then also, by the way, people teaching webinars vary drastically, right? Mm-hmm. Because my mentor on webinars, John Richardson, who I did a course with together, which, Create Awesome Webinars, he had that exact approach that you mentioned, which is why that course and that kind of format continues to work because you do teach a ton in your webinars. It's not just a glorified sales pitch. Yes, of course, there's a sales pitch. Of course, there's a sales pitch. Of course, you at the end of the day, your goal is to make sales, but it's also to educate and entertain and help people because you don't want them for the next time you come around with a webinar to say, "Oh my God, I can't believe it's that guy or that gal." No way. They duped me once. I'm not coming in again. So I think it's not necessarily changed. It's just that people might be a little wary because some of these things out there are just pretty yucky, I think.
Yeah, it's more important than ever that you think about their experience ahead of anything else. It's always been important to do that. But I think for a while you could get away with just blasting people. But now I don't want to say you can't get away with it because I still see webinars out there that I'm like, how is that happening? And I know that they're selling a lot of stuff. But it's a really easy way to just ruin your business. You may make some quick money, but it's like if you want to be in this for the long term,
Correct.
you have to care desperately about your audience. And you have to, I think the other thing is that you have to spend a little time building a relationship with people because they'll judge whether they want to show up to your webinar based on the interactions that they've had with you leading up to it.
Sure. And the funny thing is that I've noticed, I was actually looking back at some data on this before we did this interview. And, I look back 5-ish years ago, 4 years ago, somewhere around there. I mean, I would send out an email or two about a webinar and we'd have like 3,000 or 4,000 registrants. Okay. Mm-hmm. The reality of that has changed massively now. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just the thing. If I send an email like that, it's going to probably take 3 or 4 emails to get, let's say, 1,000 registrants, right? Yeah. That has changed. People's attention has changed. But what I've also noticed is that we are, in many cases, getting the right people there to the webinar. So I don't know. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that's like, well, if there's one grocery store, they're going to have all the traffic. But then if there's 15 grocery stores and now online grocery stores and all these different things, right? The traffic is going to be spread out. So I think it might be a combination of that and just kind of the market maturing a little bit when it comes to webinars. But what I get nervous about is when anyone tells me that webinars don't work or no longer work. I know that's them. I know that's not webinars.
Yeah, entirely. That is entirely accurate. It is not. Webinars are not going away. It's like when people are like, "Oh, email is dead." It's like, stop it. Okay, that's not right. That's just not how it works. But you have to adapt. And webinars are the same way. I'll tell you the number one thing I've seen with all of my clients that has changed dramatically in a couple of years is the show up rates.
Yes.
So let's say we get 1,000, registrants. If you get 100 people to show up, that's pretty good. And it used to be that was like, we're in DEF CON 4, like, what do we do? But now it's not that far from average. And so what that means, well, that means a few things. It means you really have to focus on the follow-up.
Yes.
Like follow-up is more important now than ever before. It's always been important, but it's way more important now than it once was. I've got a lot of clients where we'll do some sales on the live webinar. Like it'll be enough that it was like, well, that was worth it. We could stop there and it would be okay. But then we double or triple it based on the follow-up. So yeah, I mean, you've got to change the way you do things. It's just like if you're doing Google AdWords, right? You're not going to do that the same way you did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. If you're doing Facebook ads, everything's changed. We just had the Facebook apocalypse thing. You just can't keep doing things the same way that have always worked. You have to be willing to adapt and change. And when you do that, you can be successful. My entire career, my entire business is predicated on webinars being successful. And so, yeah, absolutely. If you're willing to change with the times, you can rock it with your webinars.
Yeah, I think exactly. People will have something that's, let's say, working or working-ish. And then when it starts to drop off, they, instead of saying, okay, well, what new can I do so it improves again? Instead, they say, oh, this doesn't work, right? and so we, and we've all faced that, right? So I could share a couple things that we've done, but I'd be curious to hear from your experience too. And I'm also going to share is, have you done anything or seen with your clients anything that has helped improve show up rate?
So there's a few things. One thing is when you can have either the host, like myself, or the founder or the face of the brand do a little Facebook Live leading up to the webinar. And who it is, it really doesn't particularly matter. I mean, it's cool if it's the host, but I find a lot of the time, I have some kind of a face recognition out there, but, it's not like a lot of the people that I work with. And so sometimes it's great to have them come on, answer a few questions, get people hyped up and be like, you have to show up at starting in 30 minutes or whatever. That's one thing that can really work. Another thing is really focusing on getting people to buy in your lead-in sequence. So when people register for a webinar, there should be a series of emails that go out every day, or maybe not every day, but fairly regularly leading up to the webinar. And you want people to have a reason to buy into that webinar. So what you're doing in that lead-in sequence is teasing a little bit of the content, but also having them really convince themselves of the problem that they have. So let's just say it's a webinar on professional bodybuilding, which I am not. But, let's say we're doing a webinar on professional bodybuilding. Well, it might be like, you might have to, in those emails, say, if you're plateauing in your training and your event is only a few months away, what can you do to break past that plateau? And I bet you've tried everything. That's what we're here to do because we've blah, 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 right? But it's all about getting them to really focus on that problem that they have. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, I don't want to do that because we're really focusing on the negative there, right? Like we're really pushing the problem. But the thing is, you have hopefully a solution to that problem. That's why you're getting people on your webinar in the first place. The webinar itself is going to help them a lot. So you don't have to feel bad like drudging up that problem because they already have it. They already know that it's there. They wouldn't have registered for your webinar anyway. So now it's your job to get them on so that you can help them with that problem and then provide whatever paid solution you're going to offer at the end.
Got it. Yeah, and you know what I've seen is just a couple tactics too for us that have worked very well. Number one is that with our live webinars, especially our joint venture ones, is we do a private Facebook group, right?
Yes.
And that has been huge. So meaning that builds community. It makes it, I think, more real than kind of these mystery people that are coming on, you know what I mean? And especially if I'm new to someone's audience, they don't know me necessarily. They probably know Pat Flynn or they know John Lee Dumas, whoever's hosting me, right?
Right.
And so we do these groups and we make it interactive. You know, we learn about what people's businesses are, what their challenges are, what they're most excited about learning on the training, all that kind of stuff. But it's also a reminder haven as well. So meaning my team's in there saying, oh, just, you know, we're getting started, you know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, 15 minutes. And that helps as well. The other one that we've done with joint venture webinars, especially, and also, you know, solo ones that are live, is messenger bot updates as well.
Yeah.
So we, of course, send emails out, which are obviously vital, but we also, messenger bots, another way, again, of reaching people. People are busy, right?
Yeah.
People are busy. And I know, you know, yes, we'll push the envelope a little bit. Yes, occasionally we'll get someone that says, you've sent me too many reminders, but I got to tell you, that doesn't matter to me, right? What matters to me is the people that want to be there are there and that they didn't forget about it, meaning if they didn't want to come because they decided they didn't want to, that's fine. But it's not going to be because I didn't bother them enough to remind them of it, right? And so I've noticed just that's a couple takeaways for people that those are things that I've definitely seen have helped. And again, it's more work now. Like I said, one grocery store, you could have the world's oldest eggs and someone's going to come buy them, right? But not when there's all these options out there and people are busy and people are wary and their BS meters are high. You're going to have to do more effort to even potentially get less people, but that's totally fine, right? You're getting the right people there. I mean, I was just looking at this, Tim, where this episode is going live in April. So it's after, you know, Q1 here of 2018.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was looking at this and we did well over 300 grand, actually closer to 400 grand in sales on webinars so far this year.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Now, you want to tell me it's dying? If it's dying, I will enjoy this death because I'm telling you right now, I've seen shifts, but the core of it is there of offering value, having a great offer, etc., which kind of brings me to my next sort of part. We kind of talked about the presentation itself. Have you seen any shifts, changes, best practices now in 2018 when it comes to actual presentations and things like that may be different from the past?
Yeah. I mean, I'll address one of my big ones. It can be really easy to want to hardcore bash competitors, right? I mean, we know they're out there and we often will think as hosts like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to like not necessarily call people out by name because I don't see a lot of people doing that. But what I do see a lot of people doing is like straight up, how do I put this the right way? Almost like making fun of people who would choose to work with a competitor.
Right.
And this is no bueno. It is great. Like it's perfectly good to talk about, you know, why somebody should not work with a competitor versus working with you, right? But it's not cool. Like we want to avoid making people feel like they are idiots if they've already done that. Because keep in mind, if somebody goes to buy your course, they may have already gone through a course that somebody else has made that's about the same exact thing and not gotten results. And you know what happens a lot of the time is like, well, we might feel like idiots. Like I went through this course and I couldn't get the results, even though they had all these great testimonials, right? So we don't want to make people feel like idiots. So when you're talking about competitors, it's fine to be like, look, here, you know, there's other options out there, and here's what's not great about the other options out here. Here's what's great about our option. So that's one really big thing.
Yeah. By the way, on that real, just a quick note on that, I have never ever felt comfortable doing that. Like meaning talking about other people. I mean, you get those questions. It's like, what about this person's course? Or what about this person's software? I just more try to focus on what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Like I want to focus on why we're the best and what we can do, not why you're the worst, right?
Yeah,
totally. And so meaning, and that's what we do. And also, by the way, if people start sending us emails, and it's, by the way, I know companies that do this, and it just it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, and they don't even know it, right? Because people come and say, oh, I asked a question about your company to this person, and they said this nasty response, and they want to try to like engage on that. Just not a good business practice in general. But anyway, what else you got?
Well, let's do an experiment, because we'll do a little exercise here. I love to do this. So one of the things that people will do is like, they'll say, this product is bad, my product is good. There's a thing about human language and the way that we communicate that we can use without having to directly say this other thing sucks, mine is awesome. And it's subtext. So subtext is really, it's the way that it's what we really mean when we say things. And I'll give you an example of what subtext is. So like, we're going to do this right now. So we'll do this experiment. So I want you to ask me, David, I want you to ask me how I'm doing.
Okay. How are you doing, Tim?
Good. Now ask me again.
How are you doing, Tim?
Good. Now ask me again.
How are you doing, Tim?
Good. You notice I said the same word all three times in response to the question, but they all mean very different things. So that's what I mean by subtext. And subtext is literally like, it's the reason, maybe not the reason, but one of the biggest reasons that human communication is so powerful, because it can allow you to say things and get the point across without saying, you're an idiot if you do this, right? So for example, if I were to say, let's go back to the bodybuilding thing. I don't know why I go to that. Maybe because I wish I could do it.
You got some kind of Freudian bodybuilding complex thing going on here. But all right,
I wish I
it.
could. I'm hitting the gym regularly. I'm trying. All right. So I could say, let's say I was selling supplements on a webinar, you can do it. Or I was selling a course on getting into bodybuilding, whatever it is. So I could say something along the lines of like, well, you could, use these other supplements, but, then you'd be filling your body with junk and garbage. And like, no serious trainer would ever want to do that. That's an example of the old way, like the kind of gross way. And it makes you feel like maybe you took those supplements and you're like, oh gosh, I am an idiot. Whereas instead, if I was just like, there are other options out there and you could use other options. They're perfectly valid choices. Or you could use what we have, and what we have is all natural. And you see what I'm saying? The subtext there is that what I said was that you could use other options. They're out there. But I said it in a way that was kind of like, you were like, I feel like that's not a great choice.
Right.
And then I presented you with what we're doing, what we have. And it's like, oh, that's a better choice. Now, you're not going to, when you're hosting a webinar, be literally thinking, how do I do subtext in this next line? Right. But when you start to think about it, you can steer and direct the way that you're presenting things, whether it's here's something that I want you to do right now, and then how I felt about that. You can start to use subtext to steer that. And eventually, when you practice it, you'll be able to do it subconsciously. Like, I don't think about it now, it just happens, but it does take a little bit of practice. But again, that can really help you in directing people to what you want them to do.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And let me share something that we've done this year and I'm going to talk about it in the context here of joint venture webinars, which is a big thing that we do, is that, and I actually wrote about this in our private group for my Create Awesome Webinars program, is that one of the themes that I'm seeing this year, and when you think about it, it's really a no-brainer, but rarely is this done correctly, is what I call customization, okay? So what we do, and this is new, is that what I used to do is more or less, it was the same presentation regardless of who I was talking to, okay? More or less. A few photos here, an extra bonus there, different link here, but for the most part, the same presentation, okay? What we've done now is that we literally will, I don't want to say interview, but we talk to our JV partner and we want to learn as much as we possibly can about their specific audience.
Yeah.
Okay? And we also want to know about inside jokes, funny references, anything like that that's going to help bond me with that group when I'm on a webinar with them. Okay? And now it's not that I'm doing a new presentation every time, and we have our core 7 steps to creating, promoting, and profiting from online courses webinar, right? But I will customize it enough for that audience where it is different depending on who's listening for it. So let me give you an example. Renee Christine, we did a webinar together, and it was for more handmade business owners. Okay?
Yeah.
So she told me if I start talking about crazy tech stuff or if I start talking about not doing a handmade business, approaching this as a completely separate business, they're going to get overwhelmed and it's not going to work out. But if instead I approach it as this is a way that you can add 5 figures, 6 figures, even more to your handmade business.
Yes.
Right? That's a subtle but very important change. Okay. Also, they love Renee's husband, so I had a photo of him and we made fun of it. We had a great time. Okay. Now, what's another example of that is with Pat Flynn. Okay. Pat Flynn and Smart Passive Income. So his group, obviously, they love the passive income elements. So I made sure to highlight that better. We had a bonus related to that, etc. But also, this was an interesting one as well, Tim, is that I teach when it comes to online courses that my preferred method is to record the course first before you sell it. Okay? Pat has a different approach. He would prefer to sell the course, then either do it live or drip it to people. Okay? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? You could do it either way is totally fine, right? But in the past, I was kind of, not that I was like hard-headed on my own way, but I kind of only offered that as one approach. So this year, instead, we said, listen, here's how I do it. Here's how Pats do it. We agree that either way is totally fine. You can 100% pre-sell your course, or you can 100% record it first. Whatever you're comfortable with, here's 2 different options. So that was just for his webinar. So you can kind of see where I'm going here. These things were, in my opinion, game changers. And I can tell you right now, for a fact, that we have never had higher conversion rates on our JV webinars than we have here in 2018. And that is the only difference between 2018 and 2017.
Well, and this really segues into a tactic that is kind of related. You mentioned Pat. Like, one of the things his audience is very particular on is transparency.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, which is great topic to talk about here.
Yeah, and they are huge on transparency. So, and I'm big on transparency too. So I'll give you a tactic. And it, for me, had nothing to do with sales when I first tried it. I first tried it a few years ago with Lead Pages, and it had nothing to do with sales. It had everything to do with, I saw the way things were changing. I saw that people were like, webinars are going to like sneak up on me with the sales pitch at the end, right? So what I started doing was, at first, I just started saying in the beginning, I'm going to have an offer for you at the end. It's going to be a few $100s a year. If you want it, great. If not, this will still be helpful. And that's what I started doing. And I started to see really positive reaction. People would be like, wow, thanks for being honest that you had something for sale, right? And then I was like, can I take this further? Can I just be brutally honest and as transparent and clear as possible? So what I did was, a few slides in, I got into a little bit about what they were going to learn, and I gave them the promise, and I told them who I was. And then I was like, okay, and by the way, I've got an offer for you. Let me tell you about it. And then I literally made my offer up front. I was like, here's the product. Here's how much it costs. Here are the bonuses that you're going to get. You can buy it until now, until whenever, right? And the way that I prefaced it was, I was just like, look, you have been on a webinar before probably. And if not, you know that I have something for sale, right? And so what I want to do is, instead of having you spending this whole webinar, like thinking about, well, what's it going to sell? When's the sales pitch come in? How much is it going to cost? Am I going to be able to afford it? Do I even want it? Are the bonuses good? Instead of spending all of your brain power on that, I want you to focus on the training, because the training is really darn good. So I'm going to tell you about our offer right now. We'll get it out of the way. Then you can put it aside until later when you want to make a decision. Sound good? And people were like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that you're doing this. This is the best thing ever. I feel so much better. Like, people were loving the fact that I was like, hey, here's our offer. So I don't do it every time. I've found that some audiences just don't respond really well to it. Some really do. Some places it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if I'm selling a course. Yeah,
because I'm about to pick your brain on this, because I've got some comments here. But go ahead. I want to hear that. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, that was a big one. So it works really well with software. If you have a course, it's a little different, because you got to spend some time getting people excited about your course. They have to know what's in it. The offer is a little bit longer.
Correct, because I was just going to say that. I could get as brief as you want with the offer, but it is a pretty intricate, involved, high investment, high touch offer that I would worry that if I said it early on, it would be very out of context and they wouldn't be ready for it, right?
Sure. So this is how I've handled that with one of my clients. I mentioned I have one that's a course creator, and we have found that it's better to do it at the end. But we had a lot of success doing it in the beginning for a little while, and then it started to be like, just from a flow standpoint, it didn't feel the same. But we did find that it was cool to be like right up front and say, look, at the end of this, you're here to learn about whatever, let's say project management. Okay. You're here to learn about project management, and this training, I'm going to share with you how we do our project management. At the end, though, I'm going to tell you about our program. I'm going to tell you right now, it costs $14.97 or whatever it is, right? It costs $14.97, and it is the most in-depth that we could possibly go, way more in-depth than I could do in 60 minutes. So I'm going to tell you everything I can in 60 minutes, but if you want help further, I'm going to tell you at the end more details about how you can work with us beyond this for $14.97. Does that sound awesome? Like, can I tell you about that at the end? And everybody would say yes. Like, they were all into it. Everybody was stoked. So it was like a light offer. Whereas what we found worked really well with the course stuff is instead of going even close to that deep, we would just be like, at the end, I promise we'll tell you how you can get our help beyond this training.
Yes, and that's what I've done too. And another thing, and this, I love getting into these little tactics because it's fun. Because it's funny, because if we were doing this interview 5 years ago, the interview would be about why webinars and well, you have a captive audience and you can do this. But now I think we've evolved to a point where it's just a different conversation. I find it much more interesting for sure. But something that I've done that I picked up from someone else, I don't remember who, but I really like this one, is that we've done the great content. And my webinars, honestly, are relatively long, Tim. Mine. So meaning my Create Awesome Online Courses webinar, including the content's about an hour to an hour, 5 hours, sometimes 10, okay? Then we've got sort of the pitch and explanation of the product, then we have a Q&A. So it's a relatively long thing. But what I've noticed is right before the pitch, so literally the slide that I talk about, you've got kind of two options now, right? Like option one is you take some of what we've learned and you approach it kind of the slow, or you want to go fast and you want to know exactly what to do, right? And so what I've done, and this has been an interesting shift that maybe people haven't noticed, but it's been big, is I ask people if they'd like to hear the offer.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny. And by the way, I'm totally unprepared if everyone said no. I would just be like, all right, well, I guess we got to leave now. Bye. Got to go bye. But what I do is I say, listen, let's say it was you and I, Tim, on a webinar, okay? And you were hosting me. I would say, listen, this has been a great training. We've been going at it. We've given a lot of great stuff. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Tim and I have put together a very special one-time offer for you to help you with this. Now, I never want to make any assumptions. We could cut it right now, do a Q&A and call it a day. Or if you would like to hear about this special offer that we've really put together something really cool for you guys, let me know. And I got to tell you, the enthusiasm you get for that, not only is it like a great reinforcer and gets me fired up, but I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like it kind of disarms people.
Yep. Yeah, totally. It becomes something they're looking forward to as opposed to something they're like agonizing and avoiding, right?
Right.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And so that's been one of my magic sauces,
Yeah, and I'll share another one that's related is instead of, even if you make the offer up front, or let's say you don't, it doesn't matter, like whatever you want to do. One thing that I've also found is weird is when there's like that transition to the pitch. Like it always feels a little funky no matter how long you've been doing it. It's always like, okay, now I've been giving information, now I'm going to sell. The way that I've dealt with that is finding ways to not make an offer throughout the webinar, but finding ways to kind of tease it almost.
Right. So it's not like a big secret. You always refer to it one way, kind of in one way or another.
Yeah. So let's say you've got 4 tactics, right? You're doing a webinar on whatever, and you've got 4 tactics throughout.
4 ways that Tim can become a bodybuilder secretly.
and invite me to that webinar so I can learn. Yeah, 4 ways to become a bodybuilder, right? So tactic 1, track your macros, right? So let's say that you're going to do that and you're going to talk about how to track your macros, what they are and how to track them and blah, 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 blah. You get to the end of that section and then you go, and by the way, in my course that I told you I was going to tell you about later, module 2 is all about tracking macros. And we're going to go like deep dive into tracking your macros. We're going to go into like, tools and blah, 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 blah. We'll talk more about it later, but I just want to let you know if you're really interested in tracking macros, you're going to love module 2. And then you go on to step 2. Right?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a very good way to do it.
Yeah, working it into the training so it's organically bringing up your offer. Because in software, what we'll do is we'll talk about, here's tactic 1. Now let me show you how to do it using this software, right? in courses and in physical products, but in courses, that's what you need to do. You need to just find ways to bring it up, just to be like, to like whet their appetite. Because again, I recognize as as somebody who has tried to do anything difficult before, 60 minutes is not going to get me to do anything difficult, like with any level of detail. It's going to give me the foundation maybe, but I know that if I want more, I need to go deeper. So if I'm on a training, and like I said, I'm hitting the gym regularly, I'm trying to get bigger. If I'm on a training and they're like, look, I've got this thing that's like, this has worked for thousands of people and we're going to, help you. And by the way, module 2 is all about tracking your macros. And if I've ever struggled with that, I'm like, oh yeah, I need that. I can't wait to hear about it. It just gets people ready. It makes the offer into something that's not dreadful, but it's exciting.
Right. And what we do, and by the way, there is definitely a system that I teach too, for sure, on how to go from content to pitch. We call it the bridge, right? But it's the same thing for me. I mean, I remember, I think, when I was first getting started with webinars, I probably would not even mention Create Awesome Online Courses until it was time for the pitch part, right? But now it's definitely smattered in there throughout. Meaning, for example, I will show testimonials and I will mention that these are my courses, or I will illustrate a point. So, for example, if I'm talking about how to price your online course and I give some tips, then I'll say, listen, here's Karen. She's one of my Create Awesome Online Courses students. Here's what she did and here were her results.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So now they're like, it's not they've heard that name by the time they get to the offer. And there's other ways I do that too. I mean, early on when I kind of share a very brief version of my story, I also show a slide with like thousands of Create Awesome Online Courses students on it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not a big secret type of thing, if you will. And I think that people appreciate that. It's a little more subtle, but it's not a big secret as well. Now, Tim, I want to ask too, and this is something that no one's really perfected this, I have to say. I mean, some people are good at, some people are bad at the follow-up, okay? Now, the follow-up, and we've done some really interesting things improving that too. People a lot of times say, quote-unquote, nobody watches replays. People say, the only thing that matters is the live. What would you say? What are your thoughts on following up, and what have you seen from a tactical level that works well?
Okay, you asked me this question. If you asked me this question 2 years ago, you would have heard me going, it's 100% about the live. The live is where it's at. The follow-up will trickle in a couple of extra sales, and that's great, but it's all about the live. But again, we talked at the beginning. Things have changed. And so here's what I'll say. The live is critical, but people watch replays. Like more people than ever before are watching replays. And it means more now than it ever has. So what a lot of people tend to want to do, because especially if you're a one-person show, or even if you got a really small team, a lot of people are like, I can't wait to evergreen. And I think evergreen webinars have their place. Like, do your evergreen webinars. It's awesome. But you should always be running at least a live webinar a month. Because that live webinar, that live interaction, one, you'll get a ton of conversions from it. Two, you'll be able to keep it relevant and current because, like we said, anything can change. And there's just always a place for that connection and interaction. But then the follow-up from the webinar is head and shoulders more important than it ever has been. And it's all about behavioral response. So what behaviors has somebody elicited? Have they watched the webinar? If so, and they didn't buy, then you're gonna send them emails trying to get them to go back and watch the replay. And the final email or two is going to be very aggressively pushing your offer. And I don't mean aggressive selling, but I mean like laser focused on, you watch the webinar, you know, if this is right for you, now is the time.
Yeah, and by the way, great point on that real fast, Tim, and that's a good point, because one, you do want to be aggressive. What he means by that is, yes, make it about the offer, right? What he doesn't mean is making like some kind of crazy false promise,
right?
Which is which is some people view it's like, you know, if you don't do this, if you don't enroll in my course on how to clean your house, you're gonna die in 24 hours or less. Like you don't want to be the hypey jerk, but you do want to be, you know, very clear and focus on your offer.
Right. Yeah. It's going from, what I mean by being aggressively focused on your offer is like going from the main call to action being go back and watch the replay to the main call to action being it's time to make a decision. That's really all it is. That's all we want people to do is just make a decision. You know, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't want everybody to buy the stuff that I'm selling. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't really, because it's not going to be right for every single person. So I want people to get off the fence, buy or don't buy, and make that decision and be done. And that's what those last couple emails are about. But then there's a different segment. What about the people that registered but didn't show up? Well, we need to talk to them differently than the people that showed up and watched the webinar and didn't buy, right? So now we need to talk to them and say, hey, you missed a great training. We had so much fun. And I know stuff comes up. I get busy too. Go back and watch the replay. Believe me, it's going to help you. And then here are a couple of testimonials from people that attended the webinar and what they learned. And then you're really, again, in this one, you are pushing the replay. Now, what I'll say is that sometimes the people that register for your webinars already know about your course. Sometimes they might already want to buy, and maybe they're not going to watch the replay. So still end that sequence with the offer. Even though they didn't watch the webinar, they might still want to buy your stuff. You will find on that last email
that's the magic.
You get a flood of sales. It's ridiculous. It's enough to make you want to pull your hair out. I don't have any more hair, but if I did, I would pull it out because it's like, oh my gosh, we need to hit our target. We haven't hit our target. And then all of a sudden, last day, boom, flood of sales.
We see that every freaking time. It's unbelievable. I wish it wasn't true, but it just, I mean, we see them, Tim. I'm telling you, I'm trying to see who could set the record. No one could get, because it literally closes, let's say at, midnight or 11:59 Pacific, something like that. We will get people at 11:58. We will get them. I swear. I mean, every time, and it's like a running joke, right? It's just the way it is. But anyway, I don't want to interrupt. I think you had I don't know if you had another.
No,
point
I mean that's exactly it, right? So it's about behavior. It's about responding to behavior and meeting people where they are, instead of lumping everybody into one category and saying, "You registered for the webinar. I'm going to send you all the same emails." And then, of course, the people that buy, stop marketing to them.
Correct. You want to take them off that list or whatever it is, and you want to move them into their buyers, right? Because you don't want to be peppering them with the offer too. I mean, and it's funny, Tim, because we've noticed that as well. Is that we're always experimenting with follow-ups, playing around with it, trying different things, and something that we're seeing, replays always, right? And the last day we focus entirely on the offer, but leading up to that we have replays, and we've also been messing with, and we've been doing this with our webinar together as well, is encores. Now, for those of you that are like, what the heck's the difference? An encore is basically an auto webinar. A replay is just a video that you can watch, at your leisure. You can fast forward, you can stop, you can rewind, whatever you want to do. An encore is literally you go onto the webinar. It's a replay, but it's like a webinar. I mean, meaning you're on there. It will play, like if it starts at 2:00, it starts at 2:00, right? If you get there at 2:10, it's going. You're 10 minutes in, right? And what we have noticed with that for sure, and again, jury's still out a little bit, but people like those because it kind of forces them, if you will, to go watch if they want to, right? Meaning, there's definitely a subset of the audience that says, I'll get to that replay that never does, right?
Yes,
I mean, certainly,
exactly.
I've done that for sure. I mean, I've gotten one, I'm like, I'll watch the replay at some point. And then it's like, actually, no, I'm going to watch this dog bark in the corner. People forget. So it's just another way of engaging a certain percentage of the audience. So we always do, what we've been playing with this a lot of times is if you attend the webinar, we'll fire you a replay.
Yeah.
If you don't attend the webinar, we'll fire you an encore where you can select a bunch of different dates and times or whatever, and you can choose to then watch it then. And then at the very end of it, like before the cart closes, we'll pop you a replay too. So we're always playing with that. But I think that's the overall lesson with this, Tim, is staying current, trying new things, not doing webinars from 2013. Because if you're going to do that, you're going to go down the toilet and you're going to be the person that's on Facebook that's like, webinars don't work. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, maybe the 2013 webinar doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. And I'll give you one last. This is a personal way that I've kind of dealt with webinars that you may not look at things the exact same way, but hopefully this will give you an idea. So it's really easy to get in your own head when you're doing a webinar, right? Happens to me still. I've done so many webinars, still happens. You get in your head, you're like, oh, it's a really quiet audience. They're not typing in a lot of questions, and like, it just, maybe I'm not doing a good job. But I've found that even on those webinars, the conversion rate is incredibly high, even when people are not responding a lot. Sometimes they're taking notes, they're like focused. But what I've learned to do, and this, by the way, this helps with objections too. If I'm getting a lot of like brutal objections, it helps me to have, it's not an avatar, but it's kind of an avatar for my attendee. I think of my attendee as being a parent who has, a bunch of kids running around and they're working their day job during the day and they're like watching my webinar at night or whenever it is, right? They're home, and whatever I'm teaching them, it usually has something to do with business. So I'm trying to help them get their business going or whatever it is. And I like to think that the stuff I'm teaching them could be the difference between them having more time with their family and being able to start their own business and work on their own time and blah, 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 versus, still having to grind and do this stuff. And they're loving my content. It means a lot to them, except they can't sit there typing questions and stuff because they're wrangling the kids. They're like trying to make sure one doesn't do a body slam on the other one.
No, that's real.
That has, me too, that has made a big difference for me, because that also allows me to, when an objection comes in, to not see it as them attacking me or my product or what I'm representing. It really allows me to say, this person is afraid that if they decide to buy, that they're going to be made a fool because they'll have spent money on something that isn't good. So instead, I look at every objection as somebody who really just wants to make sure they're making the right choice, and I just want to help them make whatever choice is right for them. Those two things, they've made all the difference. I know this is not like tactical marketing-y stuff, but getting out of your head in that way can really help you be in it and really listening to your audience and really helping them. That's been big for me.
I love it. Well, thanks, Tim. I mean, this has been great stuff here today. Normally I ask like one final tactic or thought, but I think that actually is a perfect place to leave it at that. So, to kind of summarize here, I mean, again, webinars, if you haven't done them, right, there's no better time to get started with these. I mean, and regardless of whether you want to take a course on it, like my Create Awesome Webinars course, or hire someone like Tim, or whatever you want to do with it, that's great. But the thing is, what I would encourage you not to do is, number one, learn from someone stuck in 2013. Right? Number two is not to go at it yourself 100%. Meaning there's help. Whether I don't care if it's hiring someone or if it's taking a course, whatever it is, just promise me. The running and gunning is going to lead to nothing but frustration and, what ifs and wasted time, wasted money, etc. So follow someone, learn how to do it, and there's no brighter time to get these going and getting those right people there. So, Tim, on the way out here, any links that you would like to share with people? They can find out more info about you. Maybe they're interested in hiring you for a webinar, anything like that. Where should they go and check it out?
Yeah, you can check. I've got a website, Paige, Paige, webinars.com. There's just a little bit of stuff and a way to get a hold of me. And, just since you're probably out there, if there's any podcasters or anything, I do a lot of podcast intros too. So you can find me at makemyintro.com.
Cool. Makemyintro.com. That is good to know, Tim, because we also have, of course, podcasters in the audience. I'm going to do an upcoming episode about equipment and stuff like that, and I will make sure to mention that again. And by the way, for those of you that want to check out a live webinar with Tim, right? Ooh. And I know he's doing more of these. They're going to be live until they're no longer live, but right now they're very much live. They're very much live. He is doing one that is absolutely killer that you can sign up for at coursecats.com/Tim. Okay, and what you're going to do is you're going to find the registration page there. It's how to easily create the perfect online course website in less than a weekend without needing a designer, a web developer, a psychiatrist, or a team of 1,000 nerds. And you can see some of what Tim kind of talked about today from a strategy standpoint. You're going to love the quick win on there. I don't even want to tell people what the quick win is. You'll get that. But make sure to sign up for that, again, at coursecats.com/Tim. And I'll probably have to talk to my team to make sure now that the risetotop.com/Tim also goes there as well. So you can check that out. And Tim, thank you so much for coming on today. This was absolutely great.
I had a blast. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thanks, Tim. And again, the show notes for this episode you can find at therisetotop.com/episode 8, the number 8. And a reminder, if you haven't checked it out, it just came out a couple weeks ago when this episode is up, is that my brand new free ebook is up. 7 steps to creating, promoting, and profiting from online courses. You could get it absolutely free. Won't charge you a dime, my friend, at 7stepsbook.com. You can use the number 7, or you can actually type in 7. Whatever you're feeling, that's totally fine. We've got you covered. 7stepsbook.com. All right, my friends. I will see you next time. This is David Sipe McGarland, and remember, if you want some fluff, you know what to do. Go pet a bunny.
I'm a beaver. I want it to Daddy. All the way to the top.